This story will have you on the edge of your seat. A man who built himself from the ground up finds himself the target of an officer who refuses to believe in his success. A simple business trip turns into a nightmare when a corrupt detective, driven by prejudice, tries to frame him. But little does he know, his target is more powerful than he could ever imagine. If you believe in standing against injustice, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button to support the character and subscribe for more powerful stories. Now, let's dive into this intense encounter. A night in Miami. When success is not enough. Damon Carter had spent the last decade carving out his place in the world. Raised by a single mother in a low-income neighborhood, he had defied the odds, earning scholarships, grinding through sleepless nights at business school, and eventually founding Carter Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech startups in America. His name was now synonymous with power, intelligence, and innovation. But none of that mattered when Detective Ryan Holt decided Damon didn't belong. It was a humid night in Miami, the air thick with the scent of the ocean drifting through the luxury hotel corridors. Damon had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal and was looking forward to a quiet drink at the rooftop lounge of the Orion Hotel, a five-star establishment known for hosting some of the world's wealthiest elite. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored navy suit, ran a hand over his freshly shaved head, and exhaled. Success had never been handed to him. He had fought for every inch of it. But some people couldn't stand to see a black man at the top. From the moment Damon stepped into the grand, marble-floored lobby, he felt the weight of eyes on him. It wasn't admiration, it wasn't curiosity, it was scrutiny. And then came the voice. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," a gruff, authoritative voice commanded. Damon turned to find himself face to face with Detective Ryan Holt, a broad-shouldered white man in a rumpled suit, his badge hanging from a chain around his neck. There was something about the way he stood, the slight smirk, the casual placement of his hand near his holster that sent a clear message. He thought he had power, and he intended to use it. Damon remained calm. He had been in boardrooms with billionaires, had out-negotiated Wall Street sharks. This was just another challenge. "Is there a problem, officer?" Damon asked, his voice even. "Yeah, there is." Holt's gaze swept over him, lingering on his Rolex, his expensive Italian shoes, the confidence in his stance. "We've had reports of suspicious activity. Fraud, theft, identity scams. You fit the description of someone we've been tracking." Damon let out a slow breath. He had heard this before. "You fit the description." The universal phrase used to justify harassment. "Really?" Damon replied, tilting his head. "And what exactly is the description?" Holt's smirk faltered for a second, but he doubled down. "Black male, mid-30s, dressed like they're worth more than they are." There it was, the truth behind the badge. Damon chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because he had two options: keep his composure or let his frustration get the best of him. He chose the first. "Detective, I don't know what kind of criminals you're used to, but I'm Damon Carter, CEO of Carter Innovations. I'm here for a business event." He pulled out his gold-tier Orion Hotel keycard, holding it up for the detective to see. But Holt wasn't backing down. His pride, his bias, it wouldn't let him. "I don't care what you say you are," Holt sneered, stepping closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "How about we go somewhere private, and you show me some real ID?" The tension in the air was suffocating. Guests passing through the lobby slowed their steps, watching, but no one spoke up. Damon could feel it happening, the silent complicity of the privileged. He refused to be humiliated. "I have no issue showing you my ID right here, detective." Damon reached into his suit pocket, slowly and deliberately, to retrieve his wallet. He had no weapons, no contraband, nothing but the credentials of a man who had earned his place. But Holt didn't wait. He grabbed Damon's wrist and yanked it forward, twisting it aggressively. "That's enough! Hands where I can see them!" Holt barked, his grip tight, bruising, unnecessary. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A hotel security guard hesitated, then turned away. A wealthy couple whispered, but kept walking. Damon felt the burn of rage in his chest. This wasn't just about him. This was about every successful black man who had been treated like a criminal the moment they stepped into a place deemed too good for them. But before he could say a word, a sharp female voice cut through the tension. "Let him go." Holt turned to see a woman in a sleek black pantsuit, her expression unreadable. Jessica Moreno, VP of Orion Hotels. She had power, and Holt knew it. "This man is one of our distinguished guests," Jessica continued, her voice controlled but firm. "And you, Detective Holt, are making a mistake." For a moment, Holt hesitated. But pride was a dangerous thing. "Ma'am, I'm conducting an investigation. I suggest you—" Jessica didn't let him finish. "No, I suggest you check your facts before you put your hands on an innocent man." She turned to a nearby concierge desk employee. "Security footage, now." Within seconds, a screen behind the counter flickered to life. The hotel's camera feeds appeared, showing every move Damon had made since entering the building. From checking in at the front desk to walking through the lobby. Nothing suspicious, nothing criminal. Holt's smirk vanished. Damon finally spoke, his voice edged with steel. "You profiled me. You harassed me. You put your hands on me without cause. That's abuse of power." Holt stepped back, his confidence slipping. But Damon wasn't finished. "You see, Detective," Damon continued, adjusting his suit jacket, "I do more than run a tech company. I invest in legal initiatives, civil rights lawsuits, public accountability projects." The color drained from Holt's face. Damon smiled. "And tomorrow morning, my lawyers will be in touch with your department and your chief. Let's see how much authority you still have then." Jessica folded her arms. "Detective, I think you've overstayed your welcome. Please see yourself out." Holt hesitated for a moment, then turned on his heel, storming out without another word. But Damon knew. This wasn't over for him. It was just beginning. The aftermath, a warning to the powerful. By the next morning, news of the incident spread like wildfire. The hotel issued a public statement condemning racial profiling. The Miami Police Department launched an internal investigation into Holt's actions. And Damon? He filed a formal complaint, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. Some battles are won in silence, others in the courtroom. But one thing was clear. Ryan Holt had picked the wrong man to mess with. Did this story hit home for you? If you've ever felt the weight of injustice, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep these conversations alive. Like this video if you stand against racial profiling. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, eye-opening stories. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. Racist cop tries to frame a black doctor, but the truth exposes him in the most unexpected way. This story will have you questioning everything. What happens when a man who saves lives every day becomes the target of someone who refuses to see beyond the color of his skin? A highly respected doctor, on his way home from a long shift, is stopped by an officer with an agenda. But what starts as an unlawful stop quickly turns into something far more sinister. Will justice prevail, or will corruption win? If you believe in standing up against injustice, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button to support the character and subscribe for more powerful stories. Now, let's dive into this intense encounter. A night in Chicago, when saving lives isn't enough. Dr. Elijah Bennett had just finished a brutal 14-hour shift at Chicago General Hospital. The ER had been flooded. Car accidents, shootings, heart attacks, and he had barely caught a moment to breathe. Now, as he walked to his car in the hospital parking garage, he longed for nothing more than his bed, a warm meal, and a few hours of peace. He loosened his tie, tossing his white coat into the passenger seat, and ran a hand over his exhausted face. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the rhythmic sound of rain against the windshield was almost soothing. Almost. As he pulled onto Lakeshore Drive, his thoughts drifted. He had saved 3 lives today. A teenage gunshot victim, an elderly man in cardiac arrest, and a woman who nearly lost her child in childbirth. But none of that would matter in the next 5 minutes. Blue and red lights flashed behind him. Elijah sighed, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Why? He wasn't speeding. His taillights worked fine. He hadn't run a red light. But he knew the real reason. The same reason he had been pulled over 3 times last year. The same reason why, despite being a Harvard-educated, award-winning doctor, people still questioned whether he really belonged in the wealthy neighborhood he had worked so hard to move into. This wasn't about a traffic violation. This was about him. Elijah pulled over, turning off the engine, and rolled down his window. He kept his hands on the wheel, just like his mother had taught him when he was 16 years old. After the talk every black parent gives their sons, a shadow moved outside his window. Then came the voice. License and registration. Detective Richard Monroe leaned down, his sharp blue eyes scrutinizing Elijah like he was something that had crawled out of the gutter. This your car? Monroe added, tapping the roof as if checking for hidden compartments. Yes, Elijah replied, his voice calm, but firm. I own it. I'd like to know why I was pulled over. Monroe smirked. Funny thing about that, you fit the description of a suspect involved in a car theft ring. Dark sedan, black male, mid-30s. Sound familiar? Elijah's jaw clenched. There it was. The same excuse they always used. I'm a doctor. I just finished my shift at the hospital. Monroe chuckled like he had just heard a joke. Yeah? Got some ID to prove that? Elijah moved slowly, reaching for his wallet on the dashboard. He had nothing to hide, but he had seen how quickly things could escalate. He handed Monroe his ID, along with his hospital ID badge, hoping, maybe this time, that logic and reason would prevail. But Monroe barely glanced at them before smirking. You doctors make good money, huh? This car must have cost a fortune. Elijah exhaled sharply. It wasn't about the car. It was about control. I'd like to know the real reason you pulled me over, Detective, Elijah said, his patience wearing thin. Monroe's smirk vanished. He stepped back and rested his hand on his holster. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. The air grew heavy, suffocating. A second squad car pulled up behind Monroe's. 2 more officers stepped out. Backup. Why would a simple traffic stop need backup? Unless they were planning something. Monroe leaned in. Step out of the vehicle, Dr. Bennett. Elijah hesitated. On what grounds? Monroe's smile returned, but now it was cruel. Suspicion of stolen property. Unless you want me to add resisting arrest to the list? Elijah's pulse thundered in his ears. This wasn't about the law. This was about power, and he knew what happened when people resisted. But as Elijah reached for the door handle, fate intervened. The moment that changed everything. A car pulled up behind the police cruisers. Someone stepped out. Dr. Vanessa Carter, chief of surgery. A white woman, a powerful woman, and she looked furious. Detective Monroe, she called, marching toward them, her expensive heels clicking against the pavement. Monroe turned, his face momentarily flashing with surprise. Ma'am, this is an ongoing investigation. Bullshit. Her voice cut through the air like a scalpel. This is Dr. Bennett. He's one of the best trauma surgeons in the country, and you have him pulled over like he's some kind of criminal? Monroe opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The 2 officers behind him shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa crossed her arms. I suggest you explain yourself before I make some calls. And trust me, you don't want to know who I have on speed dial. Monroe's face darkened. He was losing control. Elijah, still standing by his car, watched the scene unfold with silent fury. If Vanessa hadn't shown up, how far would this have gone? How many times had this happened to black men who didn't have someone to intervene? Monroe's lips pressed into a thin line. He knew he had lost. You're free to go, he muttered. Elijah let out a slow breath and locked eyes with Monroe. This wasn't over. It never was. The aftermath. When justice fights back. By the next morning, the hospital board had heard about the incident. By noon, so had the media. And by sunset, Detective Richard Monroe was suspended pending an investigation. Elijah didn't celebrate. He didn't feel victorious. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about him. How many other men had been harassed like this? Framed, arrested, or worse, killed? Elijah decided that night he would fight. For every patient he saved in the ER, there were thousands of lives outside that hospital who needed saving too. And he wouldn't stop until justice was more than just a lucky break. Did this story hit home for you? Have you or someone you know ever faced racial profiling or injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you believe in fighting against discrimination. Subscribe for more powerful, thought-provoking stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and never be silent. Racist cop arrests a black scientist, but her secret identity turns the tables in a way he never expected. This is the kind of story that will leave you speechless. A decorated scientist on the brink of a groundbreaking discovery faces the ugliest side of law enforcement when she's wrongfully arrested. But the cop who thought he had power over her soon realizes he's the one who made the biggest mistake of his life. If you believe justice should always prevail, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button to support the character and subscribe for more gripping, powerful stories. Now let's get into this thrilling showdown. A night that should have been ordinary. Dr. Naomi Carter was no stranger to working late. As one of the top physicists at Stellar Innovations, a leading aerospace and defense company, she had spent years developing technology that few in the world even understood. Tonight had been one of those nights. 12 hours straight in the lab, running equations, fine-tuning calculations. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. Her work had the potential to change the future. Propulsion systems that could push human travel beyond Mars, deep into uncharted space. But before she could get too caught up in possibilities, her stomach growled, snapping her back to reality. It was past midnight. She needed food. So she left the lab, grabbed a coffee and sandwich from a 24-hour cafe, and started the drive home, eager to get some rest before another long day. She never made it home that night, because just as she turned onto Riverwood Drive, a loud siren pierced the night. Flashing red and blue lights filled her mirrors. Naomi sighed, keeping her hands firmly on the wheel. This wasn't the first time. She pulled over, heart pounding, forcing herself to stay calm. Just another random stop. Just another officer doing his job. Or so she hoped. The officer approached her window. A white man, mid-40s, stocky build, a smug smirk on his face. His badge read, Sergeant David Reynolds. "License and registration," he barked, tapping the window. Naomi rolled it down, handing over her ID with steady hands. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. Reynolds glanced at her ID, but barely looked at it. His eyes lingered on her face instead. "Suspicious activity," he said, shrugging. "Suspicious?" She was driving home after picking up a sandwich, but Naomi knew better than to argue. "Where are you coming from?" Reynolds asked, narrowing his eyes. Naomi tightened her grip on the wheel. "I'm coming from work." "Oh yeah?" He peered at her ID again, then scoffed. "Says here you're a scientist. What kind of scientist is driving around at midnight?" There it was. She had seen this exact expression before. The disbelief, the arrogance, the refusal to believe that a black woman could be anything but a suspect. She took a slow breath. "I'm a physicist at Stellar Innovations. I just finished a late shift at the lab. That's all." Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. He didn't believe her. Then, without another word, he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I got a possible stolen vehicle here," he said casually, like he was ordering coffee. Naomi felt her stomach drop. Her car, her own car, was suddenly suspicious. "Sir," she said carefully, "this is my vehicle. You have my registration. There is no reason." "Step out of the car," he cut her off. Naomi clenched her jaw. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew where this could lead. A refusal would mean resisting arrest, and resisting arrest, for someone like her, could mean never making it home. From scientist to suspect, the moment she stepped out, Reynolds grabbed her wrist. "Hands behind your back," he ordered. Naomi stiffened. "Excuse me? You fit the description of a suspect involved in vehicle theft in this area. Now turn around." She tried to keep her voice steady. "I am not resisting, but I need to understand." Before she could finish, he yanked her arm behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder. "Stop resisting," he muttered, twisting her wrist as he slammed the cuffs on. Naomi winced, the metal dug into her skin. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This was happening. Right here, right now. The world would see her as a criminal before it ever saw her as a scientist. She bit back her anger. If he wanted a fight, he wouldn't get one from her. Because she had something he didn't. Power. And it was about to turn this entire night upside down. The truth that changed everything. As Reynolds shoved her toward his squad car, another set of headlights approached the scene. A sleek black SUV. The kind only government officials drove. Naomi felt a familiar sense of relief as the driver's door opened. A tall black man in a suit stepped out. Commander Jonathan Pierce. Reynolds frowned, suddenly uneasy. "Sir, this is an active arrest." "Let her go," Pierce said, his tone cold and authoritative. Reynolds hesitated. "I said let her go." Reynolds looked between Naomi and Pierce. His confidence wavered. Pierce pulled out his ID, flipping it open. "Department of Homeland Security." Reynolds froze. "You just arrested a top government scientist," Pierce continued, stepping closer. "Dr. Naomi Carter has level 5 security clearance and is responsible for developing defense technologies that protect this country." Reynolds paled. She was acting suspicious." Pierce stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "No, she was driving home, and now you're about to lose your badge." Reynolds looked like he wanted to disappear. His hand shook as he reached for his keys, unlocking Naomi's cuffs. Naomi rubbed her sore wrists, watching him with calm fury. Reynolds avoided her eyes. He knew. He knew he had messed with the wrong person. Pierce turned to Naomi. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but inside, she was shaking, not from fear, from rage, because she knew the truth. If she had been anyone else, if Pierce hadn't shown up, she would have spent the night in jail for nothing. The aftermath. When power fights back. The next day, Reynolds' body cam footage went viral. By evening, he was suspended pending an investigation. And by the end of the week, he had been fired. But for Naomi, this wasn't about one bad cop. This was about an entire system that assumed she was a criminal before it recognized her brilliance. And she was done staying silent. She took to the news, the courts, and the streets to ensure this would never happen again. Because next time there might not be a Commander Pierce to step in. And next time someone like her might not make it home. This story isn't just a story. It's reality for too many people. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you stand against racial injustice. Subscribe for more powerful stories that need to be told. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and never be silent. Racist woman humiliates black airline passenger, but she's about to get the shock of her life. You won't believe how this story ends. A routine flight takes a shocking turn when a racist passenger humiliates a black man, only to discover his real identity in the most dramatic way possible. If you believe justice should always prevail, hit that like button to support the character and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that need to be heard. Now, let's dive into this incredible tale of karma, resilience, and poetic justice. A flight she would never forget. Nathaniel Brooks had always loved traveling. As an undercover federal investigator, he spent more time in the air than on the ground, hopping from city to city on classified assignments. But today's flight wasn't for work. It was supposed to be a simple trip home after months away. He boarded the plane, found his seat in first class, and settled in with a sigh. The luxury of a wide leather seat and extra legroom was something he had earned. Not that he had to explain that to anyone. But someone was about to make it their mission to challenge him. And she made herself known immediately. "Excuse me," a sharp voice rang out, slicing through the quiet hum of passengers settling in. Nathaniel barely looked up as a tall, blonde woman in an expensive designer coat stared at him with thinly veiled disgust. Her icy blue eyes flicked between him and the empty seat next to him. "I think you're in the wrong section," she said. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. He had seen this before. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice calm. The woman scoffed, crossing her arms. "I think you're in my seat." Nathaniel glanced at his boarding pass. 3A. He gestured to the number printed above his seat. "No, this is my seat." The woman's lips pursed. "I doubt that." Nathaniel knew exactly what she meant. She wasn't questioning his boarding pass. She was questioning his existence in first class. Passengers around them started to glance over. The flight attendant, a young woman with auburn hair, approached. "Is there a problem here?" The woman, clearly emboldened by an audience, turned to the flight attendant with an exaggerated sigh. "Yes, there is. This man is sitting in first class, but I'm certain he's meant to be in coach." Nathaniel felt his jaw tighten. Before he could speak, the flight attendant smiled politely. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" The woman huffed, but dug through her purse and handed it over. The flight attendant checked it, then looked back with a tight smile. "Ma'am, your seat is 5B. That's 2 rows behind him. You're in the wrong seat." The woman's face paled. Nathaniel could feel the entire plane watching, but she wasn't about to back down. Instead, she changed tactics. "Well, that's not the point," she snapped. "I don't feel comfortable sitting next to him." The plane went dead silent. Nathaniel felt the weight of every stare. Even the flight attendant looked momentarily stunned. "I'm sorry?" she asked, as if giving the woman a chance to rethink her words. But the woman stood firm, her chin raised in defiance. "I paid for a first-class experience. I don't want to sit next to someone who doesn't belong." Nathaniel inhaled sharply. She had just said the quiet part out loud, and he had a lifetime of experience dealing with people like her. The breaking point. The flight attendant's polite mask cracked. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm, "this passenger has every right to be here. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you take your seat or leave the aircraft." The woman's face twisted in rage. "I'll have your job for this," she spat, turning on her heel and storming toward the front of the plane. Nathaniel watched with quiet patience. He knew what was coming next. A few moments later, a flight supervisor arrived, and behind him, a pair of uniformed airport security officers. Nathaniel simply sat back, waiting. The woman launched into a theatrical rant, claiming she was being harassed and threatened by the flight crew. "They're treating me like I'm the problem," she shrieked. The supervisor remained calm and professional. "Ma'am, our records indicate that Mr. Brooks is a frequent flyer and a respected customer. Your behavior, however, is in direct violation of airline policy." The woman's eyes widened. "I'm the one being discriminated against," she snapped. One of the officers finally spoke. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice." But she wasn't listening. She pointed a shaking finger at Nathaniel. "Why won't anyone ask him who he really is?" And that's when Nathaniel smiled, because this was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment of truth. Nathaniel reached into his leather carry-on and slowly pulled out his federal badge. The same badge that identified him as a high-ranking investigator for the Department of Justice. The woman went completely silent. Nathaniel turned the badge over in his hands for the entire plane to see. Then, looking her directly in the eyes, he said, "I investigate cases of racial discrimination for a living, and right now you're making my job way too easy." The gasp that rippled through the cabin was deafening. Passengers whispered among themselves. The woman staggered back as if she had been struck. Her entire body stiffened as she realized her mistake. Nathaniel gave her a long, slow stare. "Would you like me to file a report?" he asked, his voice as calm as ever. For a moment, she looked like she might faint. And then, without another word, she turned and practically ran off the plane. The security officers didn't stop her, because she had already sealed her fate. The aftermath. When karma strikes back. Nathaniel simply shook his head. He had dealt with worse. But this moment? This one felt different. Because this time, the whole world had seen it. By the time the plane landed, video of the encounter had already gone viral. The woman was identified, her name blasted across social media. Her company issued a statement condemning her behavior. And by the end of the week, she had been fired. But the real victory? Nathaniel got to enjoy his flight in peace, sipping champagne. In first class. Exactly where he belonged. This is why we tell these stories. Because racism should never go unchecked. Have you ever witnessed something like this? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you believe people should be held accountable for their actions. Subscribe for more eye-opening stories that challenge injustice and celebrate resilience. Until next time, stand up, speak out, and never back down. He humiliated her in front of everyone, but he had no idea who she really was. You won't believe how this one ends. A rude, arrogant man thought he could humiliate a woman in public, assuming she was weak and powerless. But when the truth comes out, he realizes he picked the worst possible person to mess with. Stick around to the end for the most satisfying twist you'll ever hear. If you believe in justice and standing up for what's right, smash that like button and drop a comment to support the main character. Subscribe now for more powerful stories that expose the truth and celebrate resilience. Now, let's dive in. A humiliation she'd never forget. Vanessa. Carter had always been the quiet type. She wasn't the kind of woman to raise her voice or seek attention. She kept to herself, working hard, minding her business. She believed in dignity, respect, and walking away from unnecessary conflict. But today, she was going to be pushed past her limit. It started at Gordon's Steakhouse, an upscale restaurant known for its strict reservations and long wait lists. Vanessa had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. She arrived on time, dressed elegantly, ready to enjoy a quiet evening with her best friend. But then she saw him. A tall, middle-aged man in a perfectly pressed suit, standing at the front of the reservation desk. He had the air of entitlement around him, the kind of man who never heard the word no. And the moment Vanessa stepped inside, his eyes landed on her, and they narrowed. She could feel it immediately. A man with a vendetta. The hostess had barely greeted Vanessa before the man stepped forward. "Are you sure she belongs here?" he asked loudly, nodding toward Vanessa. A few heads turned. Vanessa felt a wave of heat rush to her face. She had done nothing wrong. "Excuse me," she said, keeping her voice calm. The man scoffed. "I just think it's interesting," he said, "that some people show up and expect to be seated in a place like this." Vanessa's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what he was saying. He didn't see her as someone who belonged in an upscale restaurant. He saw her as an outsider. The hostess looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't insult our guests." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, come on," he said. "I'm just saying, some people should stick to the places they can actually afford." Vanessa's hands tightened into fists. Her best friend Lauren stepped up beside her. "Do you have a problem?" she snapped. But Vanessa held up a hand. Because something in her gut told her to wait. To let this play out. Because she had a feeling. He was about to regret this. The ultimate power move. The hostess was clearly panicked. "Miss Carter," she said quickly, "your private dining area is ready." The entire restaurant went silent. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. And then, she smiled, because now the truth was about to come out. "Thank you," she said, stepping forward. The arrogant man stiffened. "Private dining?" he repeated. The hostess nodded quickly. "Yes, Miss Carter is our VIP guest tonight. The restaurant has been reserved under her name." The man's face drained of color. Vanessa turned to him slowly. "I didn't want to say anything," she said, her voice calm, measured. "But I actually own this restaurant." The man's jaw dropped. A murmur rippled through the restaurant. "Wait, what? She owned the place?" The man stumbled over his words. You can't be serious." Vanessa turned to the hostess. "I take it this gentleman doesn't have a reservation?" she asked. The hostess shook her head. "No, he was trying to get a table without one." Vanessa gave the man a long, considering look. "Well," she said, her smile tightening, "I guess that means you don't belong here after all." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, humiliated. The sweetest revenge. The moment Vanessa disappeared into the private dining area, the entire restaurant erupted. People whispered. Some laughed. A waiter nudged the hostess. Did that just happen? Meanwhile, the man stood frozen. He had spent the last 10 minutes belittling a woman, assuming she was beneath him, only to discover she literally owned the place. And now? He had nothing to say. As the restaurant manager approached, the man snapped back into reality. Look, I didn't know who she was, he stammered. The manager crossed his arms. Does it matter? He asked. The man's mouth opened, then shut. Because he knew the answer. And then, the manager smiled. Sir, I'm afraid we don't tolerate rude customers. The man blinked. Wait, was he about to be kicked out? Before he could protest, the manager gestured toward the door. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The entire restaurant fell silent again. The man's face burned red. He had no choice. With a huff of frustration, he turned and stormed out of the restaurant. Vanessa. She enjoyed a perfect dinner in her private dining suite. And when she finally stepped out, the restaurant erupted in applause. Because everyone had just witnessed the best karma of all time. The lesson? Never judge someone by their appearance. Never assume someone is beneath you, because the person you choose to disrespect might just own the place. If you loved this story, show Vanessa some love by hitting the like button. Tell us, have you ever seen karma strike back this perfectly? Drop a comment below. Subscribe for more powerful stories that prove justice always wins in the end. And remember, respect costs nothing, but losing it will cost you everything. He left her to die. But karma had other plans. This story will shock you. A man abandoned the woman he swore to protect, thinking she was helpless and broken. But when fate took an unexpected turn, he found himself at her mercy, and what happened next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end for the most powerful moment of all. If you believe in justice and second chances, hit that like button and drop a comment to show your support. Subscribe now for more emotional, gripping stories that prove karma is always watching. Now, let's dive in. A love that turned to betrayal. The rain came down in sheets, pounding against the pavement like nature itself was screaming. Emma Dawson lay motionless in the middle of an empty parking lot, her body aching, her breath shallow. She didn't know how long she had been lying there. Minutes? Hours? All she knew was that the man she had loved, the man she trusted, had done this to her. Aiden. She could still hear his voice echoing in her head. You're nothing without me, Emma. Nothing. And then he had walked away. Left her there. In the cold, in the dark, in the rain. Her vision blurred. She tried to move, but pain shot through her ribs, forcing her back down. No one was coming for her. No one knew where she was. And the man who should have protected her had left her to die. A dangerous escape. Emma had always believed in love. She had believed in Aiden. He had been charming, kind, protective, at least in the beginning. But over time, she saw the cracks, the controlling behavior, the jealousy, the way he made her feel like she was trapped. And tonight, when she had finally gathered the courage to leave, he had snapped. You want to walk away? He had growled. Let's see if you can crawl first. And now she was here. Alone, wounded, Struggling to breathe, Emma gritted her teeth, forcing herself to move. She wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't let this be the end of her story. With every ounce of strength she had left, she dragged herself across the pavement, searching for anything, anyone who could help. She had to survive. She had to. Help came from the unlikeliest place. Headlights. A car was approaching. Emma's heart hammered. She lifted her hand, tried to wave. The vehicle slowed. For a split second, hope flickered in her chest. But when the driver stepped out, that hope turned to ice. It was Aiden. His expression was unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he sighed. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Emma felt rage build inside her. After everything he had done, after abandoning her, he had the audacity to act as if this was her fault? She forced herself to sit up, ignoring the pain. "Aiden," she said, her voice shaking. "You left me here. You could have killed me." He shrugged. "I thought you'd take the hint." A wave of nausea hit her. How had she ever loved this man? How had she not seen the monster underneath? Aiden sighed again, like he was bored. "Get up, Emma. I don't have all night." She didn't move, because suddenly, a realization crashed over her. He wasn't here to help her. He wasn't here because he cared. He was here because he wanted to make sure she stayed down. And for the first time in her life, Emma was truly afraid. A moment of fate. Aiden took a step forward. "You shouldn't have pushed me, Emma." Her body screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move, scrambling back. Aiden smirked. "Where do you think you're going?" And that's when it happened. The sound of another engine, the blinding glow of headlights flooding the parking lot. Aiden froze. Emma turned her head, squinting against the brightness. A car had pulled up behind Aiden's, and stepping out was a man Emma hadn't seen in years. Her brother. The reckoning. Ryan Dawson had been searching for his sister for weeks. Ever since she had stopped answering his calls, a sick feeling had settled in his gut. Now, standing in the rain, seeing her on the ground, bruised and terrified, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, unfiltered rage. His eyes snapped to Aiden. "Did you do this to her?" Aiden had the nerve to chuckle. "What if I did?" Ryan lunged. The impact sent Aiden sprawling. Emma gasped, watching as the two men crashed to the ground. Ryan landed a punch, then another. But Aiden wasn't going down without a fight. He shoved Ryan back, scrambling to his feet. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," Aiden growled. Ryan wiped the rain from his face. "Yeah?" He took a step forward. "Neither do you." Justice. Finally. The sound of sirens filled the air. Aiden's face twisted. He turned to run. But Ryan was faster. He tackled Aiden to the ground. Within seconds, red and blue lights flashed, and two officers stepped out of a patrol car. Aiden tried to protest, but the evidence was all over him. The bruises on Emma. The witness statement from Ryan. The truth was finally catching up to him. As the officers dragged him away, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. She was free, finally free. A new beginning. The days that followed were a blur. Police reports, statements, hospital visits. But through it all, Emma never felt alone. Her brother stayed by her side. Her friends rallied around her, and for the first time in her life, she realized she wasn't weak. She had survived. She had escaped. And now? She was going to live. No more fear, no more pain. Only new beginnings. The lesson? No one has the right to control you. You are stronger than you think. And the people who hurt others always, always get what's coming to them. If you're proud of Emma for fighting back, hit that like button. Have you ever seen karma work this fast? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more powerful stories that prove justice always wins in the end. And remember, no matter what you've been through, you are never truly alone. The secret she kept almost cost her everything. This story will break your heart and restore your faith at the same time. When an innocent woman's deepest secret is exposed, she finds herself in grave danger. But just when all hope seems lost, an unexpected twist changes everything. Stay until the end. The final moment will shock you. If you believe in strength, survival, and justice, hit that like button and drop a comment to show your support. Subscribe now for more emotional and gripping stories that prove resilience always wins. Now let's begin. A secret buried in silence. The city lights flickered against the dark sky as Olivia Carter walked home, gripping the strap of her bag tightly. The chill in the air sent shivers down her spine. But it wasn't the cold that made her uneasy. It was the fear. The fear that he knew. That her secret was no longer safe. For 2 years, Olivia had worked tirelessly to protect herself. She had lived in quiet anonymity, avoiding trouble, keeping her head down. But now the shadows felt closer. The whispers seemed louder, and the man she had been running from, he was here, watching, waiting. The man who wouldn't let go. Olivia had made one mistake, one terrible mistake. She had trusted Logan Hayes. Once upon a time, he had been her everything. Charming, protective, intoxicating. But behind the smile was a monster. Logan was controlling, violent, and dangerous. And when Olivia had finally escaped him, she thought she was free. She had changed her name, moved to a new city, started over. But Logan never let go. He had spent the last 2 years searching for her, and tonight he had found her. Nowhere left to run. As Olivia turned the last corner to her apartment, she felt it. A presence behind her. The fine hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Her instincts screamed at her. Run! She spun around, heart hammering. And there he was, leaning casually against a streetlight, smirking. Did you really think you could hide from me forever, Liv? Her breath caught. His voice was exactly the same. Smooth, low, deceptively calm. But she knew better. That voice was the sound of a nightmare returning. A trap with no way out. Olivia staggered back, her pulse wild and frantic. She had prepared for this moment. She had locks on her doors. A panic button. A plan. But now, standing face to face with him, all those preparations felt useless. Logan stepped forward, tilting his head. I see you've been busy. He gestured at her. New life, new name. But I know you, Liv. You'll never belong anywhere but with me. Her stomach twisted. You need to leave. She kept her voice firm, but the fear crept in. Logan's smirk widened. Or what? Her fingers tightened around the pepper spray in her pocket, but before she could react, he moved. Fast. A rough hand grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. The pepper spray clattered to the ground. You really thought that would stop me? He hissed. She struggled, but he was too strong. And then, the sound of footsteps. A voice, deep, commanding. Let her go. An unexpected savior. Olivia's head snapped toward the voice. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood at the end of the alley. Detective Caleb Ross, her neighbor, the man she had tried so hard to avoid. She had never wanted to involve him in her mess. But now, staring into his sharp, unwavering eyes, she had never been more relieved to see anyone in her life. Logan's grip tightened, but Olivia saw it. the flicker of hesitation in his expression. Caleb stepped forward, hand hovering over the gun at his waist. "I said let her go." Logan laughed. "Stay out of this, cop. This is between me and Olivia." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You lost that right the day she ran from you." Logan's smirk faltered, and then all hell broke loose. A fight for survival. Olivia barely had time to react before Logan lunged. Caleb moved just as fast. The two men clashed, a brutal, violent struggle. Logan was ruthless, but Caleb was trained. A fist collided with Logan's jaw. He staggered, but he wasn't done. He reached into his coat. A blade flashed. Olivia gasped. Caleb dodged, barely missing the slash. Logan turned back to Olivia, grabbing her arm. And then, a gunshot. The world froze. Logan collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder in agony. Caleb stood over him, gun still smoking. "Stay down," he warned. And for the first time in years, Olivia saw it. Logan wasn't in control anymore. He never would be again. Freedom. At last, the police arrived minutes later. Logan was dragged away, his eyes burning with rage. But Olivia didn't care. She was safe. Finally. Safe. As the officers questioned her, Caleb never left her side. "You okay?" he asked, voice softer now. She nodded, though her hand still shook. "I will be." For the first time in years, she believed it. The lesson? You are never truly alone. The past doesn't define you. The strength to escape it does. And sometimes, the people we push away are the ones who save us. If you believe Olivia is a survivor, hit that like button. What would you have done in her place? Comment below. Subscribe now for more powerful stories that prove strength and justice always win in the end. And remember, no matter how dark the past, the future is always yours to reclaim. The day he fought back. You won't believe what happened next. This story will have your heart racing. What happens when a man who has been pushed down for years finally fights back? This is the moment he takes a stand against the people who tried to destroy him. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Stay with us until the very end. You won't believe the final twist. If you love justice, resilience, and standing up to bullies, hit that like button and drop a comment to show your support. Subscribe now for more stories that prove courage always wins. Now, let's begin. A life of silence. A moment of strength. Malcolm Hayes had learned one painful truth in his 38 years of life. Some battles are lost before they even begin, at least that's what they wanted him to believe. For years he had endured. He had swallowed his pride, bitten his tongue, and let the world walk over him. Why? Because he had been taught that fighting back would only make things worse. That people like him didn't win, that justice wasn't meant for him. But today, that lie was about to shatter. The breaking point. Malcolm had worked at Northgate Finance for 7 years. 7 years of being overlooked, underpaid, and disrespected. 7 years of watching less qualified men rise through the ranks while he remained stuck in the same position, no matter how hard he worked. 7 years of enduring the thinly veiled jokes, the condescending smirks, the deliberate exclusion from important meetings. And the worst of them all? Jonathan Parker, his supervisor, his tormentor. A man who had made it his personal mission to humiliate Malcolm at every turn. And today, Jonathan had gone too far. Humiliation in front of everyone. The morning had started like any other, until Malcolm walked into the break room. Laughter, snickers. A group of co-workers huddled around a phone, whispering. Then he saw it. his paycheck. Projected onto the break room television screen for everyone to see. Jonathan Parker leaned against the counter, arms crossed, grinning. "Damn, Hayes. I knew they paid you peanuts, but this? I'd be embarrassed to show my face." Laughter erupted. Malcolm's stomach twisted. His private information, his salary, exposed. For entertainment. To break him. For a moment he did what he always did. He clenched his fists, lowered his gaze, told himself to let it go. But this time, something snapped. The moment everything changed. Silence fell as Malcolm stepped forward. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Something you want to say, Hayes?" For the first time in 7 years, Malcolm met his gaze. Steady, unwavering. "Yeah, I do." Jonathan smirked, waiting for another meek response. But then, Malcolm grabbed the remote and turned off the screen. The room went still. The laughter stopped. "You think humiliating people makes you powerful?" Malcolm's voice was calm, but sharp as a blade. "You think if you tear me down enough, I'll break?" Jonathan chuckled, but it was nervous. "Relax, man. It was just a joke." "No, it was an attack, and I'm done letting you get away with it." The first time he fought back. Jonathan's smirk vanished. "What are you gonna do, Hayes? Complain to HR?" He laughed. "We both know how that'll go." And that was the truth that had kept Malcolm silent for so long. HR wasn't on his side. They never were. But today, he didn't need them. The last straw. Malcolm stepped forward, closer than he had ever dared. And for the first time, Jonathan stepped back. "You think I'm afraid of you, Parker?" Malcolm's voice was low. Steady. "I'm not." Jonathan scoffed, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't in control anymore. Malcolm wasn't playing along. Not this time. "Here's what's going to happen," Malcolm continued. "You're going to issue a written apology. You're going to send it to every single person who saw that screen." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Or what?" Malcolm's eyes didn't waver. "Or I go public with everything you've done to me. And believe me, Parker, the company might protect you. But the internet won't." A beat of silence. Then another. And then, Jonathan turned pale. Because he knew. He knew Malcolm wasn't bluffing. He knew that if this got out, if people saw the real Jonathan Parker, his career would be over. And Malcolm, for the first time in 7 years, he had won. The aftermath. Jonathan Parker never spoke to Malcolm again. The apology was sent. The break room never echoed with laughter at his expense again. And 2 weeks later, Malcolm quit. He walked out of that building for the last time, head high, shoulders back, unbroken, because for the first time in his life, he had stood up for himself. And he had won. The lesson? You are not weak just because they make you feel small. Standing up for yourself is never easy, but it's always worth it. Your silence does not protect you. Your courage does. If you believe Malcolm is a fighter, hit that like button. Have you ever been pushed to your breaking point? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments. Subscribe now for more stories of resilience, strength, and standing up for what's right. And remember, you are stronger than they want you to believe. When the system tried to destroy him, he fought back and won. This is a story of courage, injustice, and an unstoppable fight for truth. They thought they could silence him. They thought they could take everything from him. But they underestimated his will to fight back. This story will outrage you, inspire you, and make you believe in justice again. But you won't believe what happens at the end. If you're tired of seeing the powerful get away with corruption, hit that like button. If you believe in fighting for what's right, comment below to show your support. Subscribe now for more stories that prove courage always wins. Now, let's dive in. When they took everything, he fought back. Jackson Miller had always believed in hard work. Growing up in a small town, he was raised to believe that if you put in the effort, if you played by the rules, the world would reward you. But the world doesn't play fair, and neither do the people in power. After 12 years of building his life at Clearwater Construction, Jackson thought he had finally reached stability. He wasn't rich, but he was comfortable. But he wasn't famous, but he was respected. And most importantly, he had earned every single thing he had. But in one day, in one moment, they tried to take it all away. The setup. Jackson walked into work that morning like any other day, except something felt off. Whispers, side glances, and then the meeting. He was called into the office, where his boss, Richard Caldwell, sat with a forced expression of sympathy. "Jackson, there's been an issue." Jackson's gut twisted. "What issue?" Richard sighed, sliding a folder across the desk. "We found some irregularities in the accounts. Money missing. Your signature is on the paperwork." Silence. Jackson blinked, then laughed. "You're joking." But Richard wasn't. "I wish I were." Jackson's hands curled into fists. He had never stolen a dime. He had been the most honest worker in this company. And now, they were pinning this on him. The betrayal. "I didn't do this," Jackson said, his voice deadly calm. "Then how do you explain this?" Richard slid another paper forward. Forged signatures. Altered accounts. It was so perfectly planted, so neatly orchestrated, that it made Jackson's stomach turn. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. He looked up at Richard, his pulse pounding in his ears. "You know I didn't do this." Richard sighed again, leaning back. "Maybe you didn't, Jackson. But someone has to take responsibility." There it was. The truth. They needed a scapegoat. And they had chosen him. Jackson felt the walls closing in. If they reported this, his reputation would be destroyed. He could lose everything. His job, his home, his future. And worst of all, they didn't even care. Fighting back. Most people? They would have accepted the loss. They would have begged for a quiet exit. They would have walked away in shame. But not Jackson. He was not going to let them rewrite his story. He was going to fight. "You can try to blame me," he said, his voice firm, unshaken. "But I'm going to prove the truth. And when I do," he leaned forward, eyes locked onto Richard's, "I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." For the first time, Richard hesitated, because Jackson wasn't afraid. And that changed everything. The ally Jackson didn't go home to cry. He went home to plan. And he wasn't alone, because there was one person who believed in him. Rebecca Hayes, an old friend, a brilliant attorney. When Jackson told her everything, she didn't hesitate. "They picked the wrong man to frame," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's bring them down." Uncovering the truth. Over the next 2 weeks, Jackson and Rebecca dug deep. They went through emails. They tracked old records. And then, they found it. The real culprit. An executive named David Langley. He had been stealing money for years, and now he was using Jackson as a cover. Rebecca smirked. "Gotcha." With the evidence in hand, Jackson marched back into that office. The showdown. The room was full. Richard, the board of directors, the same people who had turned their backs on him. And Jackson? He walked in like he owned the place. "Before we go any further," Jackson said, tossing the files onto the table, "maybe you should take a look at these." Richard picked them up, his face turning pale. David Langley's emails. The real transactions. The proof. Jackson leaned forward. I wonder what the shareholders would think if they knew the real story. Silence, cold, heavy, and then Richard caved. Jackson, let's talk about this. But it was too late. Because Jackson? He wasn't asking. The victory. David Langley was fired. Richard was exposed. And Jackson? Cleared of all wrongdoing. Not just that, he was offered his job back. But Jackson? He smiled and walked away. Because he had won. The lesson? Never let them tell your story. Fight back. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing up when no one else will. Truth always wins. If you believe Jackson was right to fight back, hit that like button. Have you ever been wronged and had to fight for justice? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe now for more powerful stories that remind us, courage always wins. When they tried to destroy her, she made sure they paid the price. This is the moment you've been waiting for, the final showdown. They thought she would break. They thought she would walk away in silence. They were wrong, because she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for justice. This powerful conclusion will leave you speechless, and by the end, you'll see why she refused to back down. Comment below if you believe in standing up for what's right. Like if you support justice and resilience. Subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us to never give up. Now, let's finish this fight. The final battle for justice. Sophia Carter sat in the courtroom, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face a mask of calm. But inside? A storm raged. She had fought for months to get here, months of digging through lies, months of standing against an entire system that wanted to see her fail. And now, now, they were finally going to hear the truth. Across the room, sitting at the defendant's table, was Detective Ryan Holt, the man who had abused his power, the man who had tried to ruin her life, the man who was about to face the consequences of his actions. The trial begins. The judge called for order. Sophia's attorney, Daniel Reese, stood. Your Honor, we will prove that Detective Holt falsified evidence, abused his authority, and targeted my client in an attempt to silence her. We will prove, beyond a doubt, that he is guilty. The courtroom murmured. Ryan Holt sat still, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. But Sophia saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew. He knew that the world was finally seeing him for who he was. A bully, a liar, a criminal in uniform. The testimony that changed everything. Sophia watched as the prosecution presented their case. Witness after witness took the stand. Her lawyer pulled up video footage that Holt had thought was deleted. The gasps in the courtroom were loud. And then, it was her turn. Sophia stood, walking to the witness stand. She had prepared for this moment, and she would not waver. She told the truth. About how Holt fabricated evidence, about how he used his badge to intimidate her, about how he thought she would be too afraid to fight back. But he was wrong. Sophia refused to be a victim, and the more she spoke, the more the jury saw the truth. The moment of justice. When it was time for the verdict, the entire room held its breath. The judge's voice was firm. We find the defendant guilty. For the first time, Ryan Holt's mask cracked. His fists clenched, his face turned red. He opened his mouth, to argue, to beg, to deny. But it was too late. The truth had won. The bailiff approached him, and as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Sophia exhaled slowly. The fight was over. She had won. What happened after? Ryan Holt was sentenced to 12 years in prison. His career? Gone. His reputation? destroyed. The police department launched an internal investigation into other officers like him. And Sophia? She became a voice for those who had none. She worked with legal groups. She fought for change. She made sure that what happened to her would never happen again. She turned her pain into power. What can we learn? Never let anyone silence you. The truth is your greatest weapon. Courage is standing up, even when the odds are against you. Justice isn't given, it's taken. If Sophia's story inspired you, hit that like button. Tell us in the comments, have you ever fought back against injustice? Subscribe now for more stories that remind us, courage always wins.